welcome back to the latest and the greatest, of course. It's the NA podcast. We're back after a little week hiatus. I might have been casting an RMR or two here and there, out in between. But don't worry, folks. We've got you covered with the recap and all the good stuff. And it wouldn't be this podcast without my boy, that Paladin, by my side. What's good, man?
Oh my god, we've had such a long week. We've had such a long week of Counter-Strike, a lot of CS. But we finally made it to the end. This is theoretically the breather for you and I. It is simply not. But
Theoretically.
but for the general CS community, we are now in the lull period where we'll have a couple tier 2 lands before we get saddled on up for Rio. But man alive, there are so many storylines that we have to get through, so many teams, dreams shattered, dreams
Made.
achieved. Yeah. Let's get straight into it.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's even need to be a question. Normally we format these like headlines we have down below in the form of a question so we can debate about it. But what is there to debate when G2 go 1-3 at the RMR? All right, I'm going to start this off here, Paladin, by just prefacing this team. People were predicting to win the major. I don't think anyone expected this performance based on recent results, anything of that sort. What happened?
I honestly don't know. So first of all, I think the actual result of it is brutal, yes. But you got to think about the context and how it was possible. I think the one best of one loss that I think is unexcusable is the one against one win. That should never be happening. I don't think you should ever be letting that map become ancient when you have quite a number of maps in your pool to go towards, and you picked ancient to take it towards, which is just ridiculous in my eyes. And then the game against C9 was actually quite a swing affair. There were about a couple buy rounds here or there, or honestly just like a couple ecos as well, that could have completely swung that round into that map into G2's favor, and we could have been into a completely different scenario where G2 was 2-0. They might have actually matched up against NIP, who looked, I mean, obviously, yeah, they went 3-0, but they were still mortal with, the new presence of Alexi B, and they could have gotten pushed by G2. But at the end of the day, it's a very coulda, shoulda, woulda thing. I've mentioned this phrase quite a few number of times because hindsight's 2020, and the fact of the matter is, Gamer Legion played a better best of three. And when you get down to it, when you're in those best of three scenarios, it should be the favorites winning 9 times out of 10, but they just weren't on their A game that day. You had Hunter kind of going absent. I think he was the biggest issue for me. I think him going absent is incredibly a huge hit for this team, especially when Hooksy isn't providing you the highest level of ratings. And then on top of that, Monacy really tried his hardest, but damn, did A-Core show up on the day. He was absolutely magnificent. And I think that at the end of it all, I think Gamer Legion was just the better team led by Shuhei. And I think that they deserved that qualification spot and to eliminate G2 because they just were the better BO3 team on the day.
Well, one thing I want to say is how Giga Chad can you get? It's funny. It's funny and all. Yeah, get all Giga Chad and all, but when your IGL is dropping a 0.62 rating against tier 2 opposition, there's a problem. There's a definitive problem. We always talked about him having to do the bare minimum for his team. Just get the 1.0 rating, secure the bag there, Hooksy, and he did that during Pro League. But if he can't maintain that, if there's no consistency with this form, like I don't care how good of a caller you can be, at the end of the day, you have to hit the shots. That is from the words of Mistum, a pro player I was talking to back at Frag. At the end of the day, you have to shoot them in the head. And if you can't, you might have the genius strategy, but if the guy on the site is getting a double or triple kill every single time, there's an inherent problem. And having that IGL bottoming out in that fashion, it can't happen. It just can't happen. If you want to have a consistent title contender, G2 might have to undergo some changes. We'll have to see. I mean, I don't think they want to undergo changes, but I think it's going to be needed if this team is going to want to be the super team that we expect them to be.
While I agree with you in this situation, I think, to me, I wouldn't make a move just yet
Of
just
course.
because I think about
It's gonna have to happen though, is what I'm
yeah,
saying.
it's gonna have to happen. I think eventually it will come to fruition. But I think as of right now, what they've got the fall finals to play out. If they win that or go deep, they should have enough points to qualify for the global finals. So you've got two of those big tournaments in the docket. And if those two don't go in your favor, I think that's when you can potentially start looking towards
Sure.
a potential move. But this is super disappointing for the organization. They've been taking hit after hit, obviously, but I think this is probably one of the biggest in terms of the CS team not making a major since the inception of the organization. So uh, a real bummer for them. But hey, I guess at least we got Gamer Legion stickers, Phi.
We don't get Captain Kurka stickers though. That's the
No, we
worst
don't.
problem
We
though,
don't.
unfortunately. Let's move it on along because we have some new boys on the block for this one. Folks, there's a ton of unexpected teams making it through to this major. Maybe a couple people are expecting some of the French boys to show on up. No, we already mentioned it earlier on. Gamer Legion is through, and Sprout obliterated the competition. I mean, admittedly, they didn't have to play the hardest teams to get a legend spot at the major, but here we are. What's the unexpected? What's weird for you?
I first of all, I think the Buchholz score bullshit that they decided to enact mid tournament is going to infuriate me till Kingdom Come, because oh my god, how is Spirit and C9 competing for the tie-breaking spot of the legend stage while Sprout get it scot-free? It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand. They're the ones that came through open qualifiers. Spirit and C9 were automatically qualified previously, so they should have the higher seed. Sprout even defeated lesser opposition beyond Fnatic. I think that was a little odd. However, I will say, as far as unexpected, I liked that BNE showed up again. Like they still took care of business. They didn't have the easiest of routes, but they still showed that they could stay within a lot of these best of threes. They pushed a lot of teams. And at the end of the day, I think they just wanted it more than some of the squads that they went to play against in these kind of qualification tournaments, qualification stages of the tournament, as well as Fnatic. I think Fnatic also was kind of on the fringes, but they haven't been to a major since 2019, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's a super big achievement for the org. OG making their first major, surprisingly, as an organization for being in the space for so long. And I think the last big one, I think that I'm kind of taken aback by, is just ENCE going 3-0.
Yeah.
Super cool that the roster was able to bounce back after kind of a disappointing EPL, if I must say.
Yeah, Ends had a weird EPL. I will say that uh, we already talked a bit about Gamer Legion so far, but the fashion that they lost some of their games and then had to win it makes it
Yeah,
all the more
poetic. Yeah.
poetic. Yeah, for sure. The
Hmm.
incredible just choke fest with that their series was versus Spirit.
Hmm.
Absolute. My boy the Terminator had to drop 30, not what am I saying, 30, 43 kills in that series, and they couldn't get it. They couldn't win it on Ancient. A massive choke, but they were able to bring it back and then take down G2. What a rocky road for these guys. They totally deserve the major. So shout outs to Gamer Legion. Bad News Eagles. I mean, I would call that a pretty big surprise. I don't think they were really on people's radar too much. Like they like, oh, cool, they're here. We expect them to be here. We expect them to maybe deal some damage, but um, problem. I mean, problems that we thought would show up. Maybe some shakiness in terms of the tactics. Certainly didn't. I think we saw the same exact team that got themselves into Antwerp. Mad firepower, crazy passion. They're like Brazilian, but not Brazilian.
No, you're completely right. I think BNE, they, I think Synopsy was one. What was a Synopsy? No, it was Juan Flatro. He basically said that it is luck that people consider a team to make it in the first time they qualify for major, but it's legit as hell when we actually do it back to back. And I have to agree. I think that this one was a tougher road, I'd like to think, to qualify, but they managed to get it done. The 2-1 over fours, absolute death match over Astralis, and then that close 16-14 against Eternal Fire, which I think are pretty competitive teams in that A side RMR. And I
Mhm.
think hats off to them to stay within it, because that team can be super momentum heavy, and you can see situations where they kind of get in their own heads and they fall apart. We saw that in the challenger stage, but not this time around at the RMRs.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move this one along, because we have some again some of the favorites. At least some of the interesting favorites showed up. NIP going 3-0, a very weird timeline that we should never be on. And besides everyone but G2, is this just going as expected for these boys?
Yeah, I think FaZe got it done. I don't care how they got it done. They got it done. I think they're a very clutch team. They'll get it done. As far as and Navi is concerned, very similar story. It's like, hey, you got there in the end. You got to that 3-0 stage. Good for you. The NIP one is obviously the anomaly of the bunch. And I think that the very curious thing about NIP is that Hampus looked very good. And he looked good under Alexi B. And I think that is probably the most interesting thing that to come of it all, because the most worrying thing of the Alexi B move is Hampus's impact would drop off a cliff and he would basically be useless under Alexi B, because Alexi B would have his own way of calling, and he might reel in Hampus as he's done with players on G2. You kind of think towards Monacy, obviously different roles, but very similar concept, I'd like to think. And Hampus was the high, I believe. Let me check actually, just to double check. Yeah, he was the highest rated player in the server. Granted, 5 maps only, but a 1.36 rating to actually close out their 3-0 run. And that Cloud9 game was legit as hell. I actually think they very much deserved winning that game. They were the better team that time around. And beating them on Vertigo to decide, that is hard to do against Cloud9. And I think the signs are good, but I'm still not really the biggest how do you say it? The biggest fan of Rez on the AWP. I saw glimpses of it, but I am not going to be jumping on that train anytime soon.
I don't have much belief. Another team that I think there's a couple teams I definitely don't have belief in. I wish I touched a little bit more on the new boys. Teams like K23 and Senegal definitely showed up and impressed. But in particular, OG, as one of the favorites going into this, I still don't have much faith for that team. They're gonna have to do a lot more to prove themselves out there. They've lost in a couple of online tier 2 tournaments. I mean, they didn't come first. All right, that's the biggest problem, with absolutely no competition anywhere else in the top 30 in that event. I believe that was a CCT Central Europe series. So it wasn't all smooth for the favorites. Mao's just looked incredibly weak. They just barely squeaked it, and they could have lost to Senegal. There were a lot of just awful performances, but they still made it through to the major. So I guess that's what counts. Let's go ahead and move this one down. We're starting to edge closer and closer. Some of the biggest L's that were taken during this RMR, besides the 2-lettered organization and Gamers 2 G2. Who else do you think took the biggest loss here? Maybe they could have qualified. Who knows?
Yeah, they definitely could have qualified. I think there was definitely a situation where things might have gone in their way, and we would have been in a completely different scenario if they had gotten 2-0, as I said before. Let me pull up the Europe RMRB before I jump to any conclusions. There we go. Europe RMRB. I think that I kind of wished we had more from Heat.
France.
They looked, yeah, just France in general, man. Like, yeah, Falcons won, but they looked incredibly limp against outsiders. That was just such a miserable series to watch. Even the game that they won against Heat was more so just Heat capitulating, like utterly just capitulating. That was a huge bummer. I'm really hoping that they can lick their wounds and come back stronger for the Paris RMRs, because they're gonna need it. They're really gonna need it, man. It looks dicey there.
Astralis are looking like a very the team everyone kind of expected. Are they even a favorite? And they can't be a favorite.
I see. I don't even think that was an upset, right?
You can't make this team a favorite anymore.
Yeah, I was discussing this with other people as well. Like, nobody really had any faith in this Astralis lineup to qualify.
Okay.
This is kind of disappointing.
The first time in the organization's inception, however, that they have missed a major. Of course, there's a bunch of different external factors coming out. The config article came out. and take what you want from it. I think the initial article definitely victimized config in that one. That's all my takes. That'll be saved for overtime, however, because we're about to run it down to the end of the segment. But yeah, Astralis take a couple L's. I would say Fours is also a big loser, in my opinion. They had expectations, and they should have been into the major over the Bad News Eagles, as much as I love BNE. Fours, they choked they choked like every single one of the series that they lost.
It's another one, right? Like they choked against Imperial as well. Like this team has some serious like youngster issues that you don't necessarily see crop up that much in the scene all too often these days. But it's a real problem for players like Zorte, players like Shalfie. Even though Jerry's cool-headed, I don't think the rest of his core is just yet.
Yeah, that's a lot of things going down for Fours, and that's the end of their major run. But now with that wrapped up, we'll jump back into some of the RMR topics. So don't leave just yet. But we'll go ahead and jump on in towards the best region, folks. I guess it's mostly just Brazil at this rate, though, because 0-0 Nation and 9Z making it through, pulling upsets left, right, and center to get to this point. Big win for these guys, eh?
The 9Z one is crazy. I think it's just shocking that NQZ and Buddha performed as well as they did on LAN. Like doing that out the gates. I didn't put them through when I did my bit of predictions, just because I thought Max hadn't proven himself as an IGL. And again, NQZ and Buddha are incredibly young and incredibly new to the scene. And the expectations for them were kind of rock bottom. You kind of just expected like, hey, this would be a great outing for them to kind of show their stuff, and then maybe come back to the Paris RMR and show what you can do there. But they impressed. They definitely impressed. The confidence that they had to go toe to toe with some of these teams, it was really impressive. They had some crazy comebacks. One against Imperial, and I believe one against 0-0 as well, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And both of those were very, very impressive. They kept it close with Evil Geniuses. But 0-0 Nation, I think, takes the cake for team with the highest skill ceiling that could show some real good stuff if they go deep. I think the big thing that I was kind of on the fence about was whether or not Cold Zero could show the passion again and roll back the years. And he had some really confident rounds. He was yelling. He had some serious energy behind him. And obviously the core of the Godsent trio is still alive and well. They're doing very well for themselves. And it seems like that integration of 0-0 and Godsent is slowly starting to become one. And I think that they could have I think that they will perform better than Imperial in Rio. I think that's a pretty safe bet, but I'd like to put that out into the ether, if you will.
Yeah, for those who are like clamoring, well, what about Imperial? What about Imperial? Look down on the right side of your screen. You'll see we have a whole topic dedicated to them, believe it or not. So my takes. 9Z, I casted their games, both their series against Evil Geniuses and ATK. And they are just a well put together team. Like they just played some solid Counter-Strike. It was not like wild rounds that they were winning. DGT went off in this event. So I don't sleep on this team when it comes down to the major. I think they play some pedigree Counter-Strike, and even their series against Evil Geniuses, they could have won. They dominated EG on Dust 2, realistically. And it really could have gone either way on Mirage with a comeback coming through. It wasn't even just the Uruguayans, though. I think David was the biggest. David, for those who haven't watched 9Z, tell all your friends about David, because he's a really, really strong, powerful entry fragger for 9Z.
So bold. He's so bold on that rifle, man.
Yeah,
I mean, the balls that this guy has is just massive.
Considering he used to be like an opper in between and like moving between roles, he's definitely turned his Counter-Strike career around and is looking like a really, really great player. So clue into that for sure. I think we already talked about NQZ and Buddha definitely delivering. I wouldn't say delivering to the same degree that they were doing online, but just good performances overall. And 0-0 Nation, they got their upset, man. They got their series win over Complexity. So they deserve it. And we'll dive a little bit into that nonsense a bit later. But the G's, the evil G's, they let's go ahead and clue into this, because this is the best news NA has heard all week. Evil Geniuses 3-0 and into the major.
I I'm shocked. I think this is the biggest shock to come out of the RMR for me personally, just because of the fashion they did it in. I thought they would capitulate just because of how deep the talent pool is for this America's RMR. And I think that the biggest thing right now is that Hext is an absolute revelation for this squad. He has single-handedly activated the old guard of Breezy and Cirque. They
Mhm.
actually look like they want to win now, just due to this energy that he's been bringing to the
Yeah.
table. And also, I mean, his raw fragging ability has also been unbridled. Like that has been a huge proponent to EG's success. And now you're really cooking with gas at this point if you're EG. I mean, personally, I think I'd still go for more consistent AWP, and then we can really talk about starting to contend for maybe uh playoff contention points, or spots rather. And I think there's really the potential in this roster now, and I couldn't say that previously, but man, is it exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I want to really touch on, I mean, Hex is not consistent overall, but you're talking about that energy point, and it is so real. Where something you just light a fire underneath your ass and you actually get going, right? You actually start
Mhm.
feeling like you need to push yourself to get to this point. It's like if anyone has played sports, and it feels like it's sometimes that when you're playing a championship game and you're all of a sudden you're trying to take yourself like to the next level, you go into the flow state. When someone's behind you, sort of amping up your unit, comparatively speaking, it means the world to those guys to all of a sudden to qualify for the major. They have a reason to qualify now. And while Hex was inconsistent, I'll give him that. He had his best series on Evil Geniuses in their qualification match against 9Z. That definitely should speak some sort of dividends about how he delivered against Liquid. Let's not talk about that. I just want to talk about all the good storylines about Evil Geniuses right now. But Hex definitely turned up, and he shows some of the potential that he can bring for this Evil Geniuses team. He isn't just some young throwaway talent like, say, One Grim was. So.
Yeah, I think the biggest part is that this gives so much hope to our region, right? Like when you go back and you look at Carpe Diem as a whole, you weren't necessarily saying that Hex is like this like godsend of a player and he needs to be upgraded. Like he was kind of in the conversation of like, yeah, he's part of the really good core of Carpe Diem, but after time and seeing him slot in like this, I'm sure it's sent a shockwave through NA to understand that like look, we can do this. We've got the potential, and we have that end goal of jumping up to Liquid and EG. Like they clearly have seen the success, and maybe we can slot ourselves into that conversation as well. Hopefully, Nouns, ATK, these guys can kind of understand that moving forward.
Mhm. Moving down, probably the biggest story out of this RMR. Imperial have the plot armor, and they make it all the way back. They trounce everyone. Trounce, I would say, but is a definitely a strong term for their victories. But if they deliver the same entertaining Counter Strike they did here, this is going to be the best major ever.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, this was just insane. It was just so crazy. I don't like. I think the biggest thing that I could take away from this one is that they did exactly what they did at Antwerp,
Oh yeah.
and that is getting into the heads of youngsters. They just have this kind of grit in this core of this team, this legendary experience where they just get in your heads. They don't play the best Counter Strike. They play the Counter Strike that makes you rub the wrong way. That you
Mm-hmm.
start to doubt yourself. You start to look at you press tab on the scoreboard and you're like, oh my god, who am I playing against? I'm playing against Fallen. I'm playing against Fur. Like
Mm-hmm.
it all starts to settle in, and you can see complexity in that final series. How worried and nervous some of these players are. Halls are getting so antsy to go for just unorthodox picks and getting punished for it. Grim in these 1v1s against Fallen. Fallen in general, just going huge with these incredible
Exactly.
highlight reel plays that you wouldn't think of this player doing. It's just so incredible to see this kind of pedigree rear
Mm-hmm.
its head in a high stakes game like this. We haven't had something like this in CS. I think for a while. I think the team that I would think about that would have this kind of caliber was VP all the way back when with the quote unquote Golden Five. They were the kind of gatekeepers of Tier 1 CS, and And now I'm starting to think Imperial is slowly starting to slot that in into that role in the Americas region.
You know, the biggest thing when I watch this team play is that they just don't give up. No matter any situation, they don't give up. They just keep trying. 2v4s, it doesn't matter. They're not out there to save or anything of that sort. They don't let anything rub them the wrong way. They play Counter-Strike is the biggest thing out of Imperial. They don't let these psychological factors get to them. Instead, they let the psychological factors boost them. This team feels unstoppable. It really is just the Brazilian land momentum that I meme about. It's like MIBR momentum or something like that. But it's so real when your opponent doesn't give up. It is such a tough game. You saw so many like man down situations that Imperial were able to scrap out and bring across the line in that series. We'll save the biggest losers, our complexity discussion, for just a little bit, as well as some of the other teams in the Americas RMR, because we move on to everyone's favorite segment. Well, folks, of course, it's your favorite segment. It's my favorite segment. I don't even have to ask Paladin. I know what his favorite segment is. It's NA or EU, where we have to pick NA or EU for every miscellaneous topic that's gone down in the past couple of weeks. And well, NA, if it's NA, it doesn't mean anything. If it's EU, make of it what you want, folks. It's not good or bad. I don't know what you guys are thinking. Either way, let's go ahead and check on into this one. The Asian RMR results are complete. Pally, your take?
Boo! Oh my god. I don't care about GG How, man. I don't know. I didn't want to see 3 best of 3s from these people. I really didn't. I also didn't want to see Rare Atom completely just disappear on LAN. How is this happening? How is it that every single analyst that I have spoken to, or caster for that matter, has all said Rare Atom IHC, this is going to be the definitive Asian RMR result? Absolutely nothing of the sort. Greyhound capitalize and IHC also get things done. NA, like this. I wanted Rare Atom stickers, man.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple inherent problems with the Asian RMR. Okay, so for one, the Middle Eastern qualifier is always just a meme of a major qualifier. It literally has been for like the last 2-3 years, where Tens is competing in a Middle Eastern qualifier. No, not even lying. Go back on his HLTV stats. Those are some of his final officials he ever played. Was in a Middle Eastern major qualifier with ATK and a bunch of South Africans. Just a couple. I mean, a big joke. Gigi How was also just a big joke, just bringing in 2 probably just standard tier 2 CIS Russian players. Trying to just carry them over to a major. Yeah, the Rare Atom's result is, I mean, the overall, the end result is unsurprising, perhaps, but Rare Atom capitulating on LAN kind of sucks. I'll go ahead and give this one the NA, and we'll go ahead and move right on along. G2, they found revenge from the grave. NA or EU?
Oh, EU, man. I always love a little Schadenfreude. Nexa and Alexi B just wreak havoc with their respective teams. It's not the cleanest wins for OG in their respects, but they've got it done. And at the end of the day, Nexa has now led an organization to their first ever major. Alexi B, on the other hand, this guy, like, you could see him just grinning ear to ear when they qualified. He was so excited when they won 3-0. Completely well deserved to these guys. I'm just excited to see whether or not they've got more staying power. Can they keep going? Like, what's the ceiling for both of these teams?
Oh, there's an HLTV interview. I forgot exactly who gave the interview on NIP.
Oh, it was Hampus.
It's Hampus. It's like, Alexi B's not a bad IGL.
Yeah.
We were like, it's like a funny statement there, Hampus. Yeah, he's not a bad IGL, and they just made it 3-0 into the major. I mean, it's utter hilarity, irony. G2 in the mud. Yeah, I mean, what else could you love? Keeping it down with the rundown. Eternal Fire, rebuild, minus major. This, I don't know what to think of this.
It's like they read the Reddit threads incorrectly. Like, they were like, oh, plus xCloud, plus xCloud.
Yeah.
But everybody was like,
we've been saying this for weeks, dude.
Yeah. But the Eternal Fire is like, you know what the best part about our Eternal Fire Squad rebuild has been? You know how we like actually look like a cohesive unit now, and like we actually have defaults that work? Yeah, you know what? Screw that. We don't actually need that. Let's just throw it out of the way. You know, get xCloud back in. I heard Reddit really loves that. We'll make everybody happy. Uh, and now we basically have the worst possible result of this. Emor is now going to be IGLing. NA. I hate this so much. Eternal Fire is doomed to fail from now on. They don't know how to manage their own roster.
Genuinely EGT roster move, however.
We've
Now
picked the right player.
we certainly picked the right player. This is an EG tier roster move. This
Yeah.
is so horrible. xCloud, yes, put him back in. But if there's anyone to take out, Paz has been just he has struggled. He struggled in EPL. He struggled in this RMR. He doesn't fit into this team. He was basically half retired. But when he was picked up by this team, by the way, this is also worth. He was playing Valorant for 6 months, and then they decided to pick him up because, I mean, damn, selling jerseys does something, I suppose. Major was doing fine from the eye test, at least. I don't know. I don't speak Turkish, so I don't know what it was like.
He was fragging well enough. Like again, they had actual defaults at this point. They weren't just playing this really brain dead pack mentality CS. I just don't.
Yeah, they
like
just
it
death ball. Typically, it would just be them death balling everywhere.
Yeah, and I think allegedly
Xantares. Yeah.
Allegedly, it's just that Major just doesn't see eye to eye with Xantares and Woxic. And if that's the
Probably.
case, get over it, man. Get over it. That is the only IGL that is ever going to take you to the top, and you have blown that opportunity. That is, you've just shot yourselves in the foot.
I don't have any faith in Emor as an IGL. I hope this team comes out in surprise because I think xCloud is the next talent that's gonna come out of Turkey. In all the Counter-Strike, but he's gonna have. I think it's gonna be a rough go at it for a lot of Eternal Fire and see how this roster does. I'm not sure how over their season exactly is. Moving on though, French Counter-Strike. Is this the end? Do we start ringing the bells? Do we start digging the grave? Yeah.
I'm gonna say you got to get your shit together, France. You've got quite a few. Like you got a really small runway at this point. Heat's got to do something. I don't know what they're gonna do. They've had a roster move
Another French shuffle. More French shuffles. That'll fix everything.
I don't even know where they come from. I don't even know.
More French shuffles. I like 3 French shuffles every year.
Let's bring RPK back. Let's bring existence from the grave, please. But
dig him up.
I don't know, man. Maybe I could see a Falcons doing work, but I don't think Masuta and Kyojin, or sorry, Kyojin's not even on that team anymore. Masuta in general is just, I'm so out on him. He can't do it, man. He's not ready for this type of CS.
I mean, Falcons are okay. But
I really like NBK though.
Yeah,
I think
NBK look great. NBK look great. I mean, this Falcons team needs to is supposed to be geared up for some sort of success. They look great online, and then absolutely tanked it. Did you have any expectations for Heat in this RMR, for the record?
I had them as like a dark horse to like slide through like a 2-2, but like they didn't even get to that stage where you could argue they make through 2-2. They just looked absolutely abysmal. I saw absolutely nothing from Afro, which I highlighted in my video that I was expecting him to deliver, especially after the good momentum that he showed. But without a true superstar AWP or superstar rifler in that sense, this team won't do anything. And Jocko, he's been figured out by majority of the scene. And so you've basically lost all your staying power. So I think that's the biggest issue with they're having this big identity crisis.
Okay. Moving on along. I mean, I'll EU, right? Just because EU.
Yeah.
But I think personally, I'm just gonna say EU. I don't think it's completely dead in the water. I think it ask me this question again in a month, and my answer might change. All right. Anyways, moving down along, CIS's performance at the RMR, was it a good, a bad, a great performance, or is the era over?
I think I'll say EU just because, look, I think the caliber of these teams should not be qualifying for the major, but they should be playing spoiler. I think they're good enough. I think that the pool is deep enough for them to provide such upsets. Obviously, Aurora just completely disappeared, but K23 Forza 1-win bait provided some level of like uncertainty to these RMRs. I think that's super important for tournaments like this to showcase that CIS has got some of the deepest talent pools in all of Counter Strike right now, and you can make a myriad of fantastic teams with just these squads alone.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it's a middle tier performance out of this. Only
Yeah.
the only two CIS teams to qualify for the major are or am I missing anything? Oh no, never mind. Scrap all that. Not two. But the couple of teams that maybe should have also got in. I think one thing on the one hand is Spirit definitely delivered. I really don't know where I was gonna go with that point. But I think Spirit on the one hand definitely delivered a good RMR out of them. Cloud9 the same. I mean, guys overall is looking good. They're not in the dominant era where we were running with, these are the big three. Navi, the Outsiders, aka VP, and the Gambit days where those all three of those teams were in the top 10, even approaching perhaps even top 5.
Yeah, it's Spirit in the mix there as well. Like
Mhm.
basically, Cato 2020 was like that region where you had like 4 fantastic CIS squads. You're completely right. You
Yeah.
don't necessarily have that kind of pedigree anymore. At least with the caliber that both Spirit and Outsiders showed throughout this RMR and the kind of rest of the best, you know.
I do want to hit on this as we are a little over the bell, but I don't really care. The bell doesn't guide me. I control the bell. Sorry, bell.
Hmm.
But the Brazil's performance at the RMR, good, bad. They were on the verge of a calamity.
Yeah.
Of not making teams to the major, but they corrected the ship. Is this was this good, bad, or is this expected?
I'll go EU. I think the teams that need to be there have achieved the headline status of qualifying, but the only squad that I'll say, hey, it might tilt me to saying NA is MIBR. Where did this team go? How did they just absolutely capitulate after a really promising EPL? I'm really disappointed with what they showed at Stockholm because they felt like a shoe-in for the 2-2 games, but no can do. And also Pain. Pain also fell very susceptible to the complexity issue where
Mm-hmm.
when Imperial and Plane play each other, uh, the
The Young
youngsters
Guns.
have basically crumbled. The Skulls and Zevi, the newest additions, the bread and butter of this Pain roster, just went for a toss, and that happens. That's exactly why I put Imperial to go through, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles, I suppose.
Yeah, the major's the highest pressure zone. 0-0 Nation making it through maybe come as a surprise to some. The win over complexity is big. Furia in and Imperial. I think that's enough Brazilian teams for a Brazilian major. I mean, I'm not
Mhm.
trying to expect anything more out of that, to be honest. So, all in all, not too shabby, not too shabby. I'll go ahead and hit him with the EU, and we'll move on along to our recap, our preview of our major, or what we can take away from this RMR and what we can use from this RMR to look ahead into the future. Just looking back on the majors and the qualifiers, how did this RMR compare to some of the other majors, perhaps Antwerp, Stockholm, or even further back?
I wanted to bring up this question in particular just because we had the RMRs. I'm going to primarily look at particularly the PGL RMRC just because we are rolling with that system as of right now.
Hmm.
And we basically had all of the games sequentially. And the way that all of these storylines kind of wrapped up in a neat little bow, as an analyst and as a person that would like to dissect some of these matchups one by one, it was a dream come true because you could basically keep track of everything as it went along, and you could retain that knowledge for future events and pull everything that you needed to. But with the ESL RMR, they all wanted to go at once, and while being as big of a studio as ESL, you have the opportunity to do that. You cut down on costs. You cut down on production value. Sorry, not production value, production costs in particular, and you get to run a tight ship because you've got 3 studios, one in I believe Sydney for Australia.
Hmm.
Even actually took place in Melbourne, and then Stockholm as well as Malta. And it was pretty smooth sailing in terms of the actual games having happening on time. But I think my biggest issue was the fact that it happened all at once, and there was a lot of things that kind of just slipped through the cracks. And the way we actually talk about the RMRs in general is a very just like, let's just throw something at the wall and see what we remember once we've put it on said wall. And I think that I've kind of struggled with all of the kind of team dissection and what teams can you say, oh, they deserve to not make it, or they did deserve to make it, or there were dark horses here, dark horses there, yada yada yada. But I think I like the PGL format a little bit better than ESL's.
Mhm.
But I think it's a matter of preference because I know Phi that you've got other opinions.
Yeah, so I kind of like we're just hitting on this, hitting on the topic of 4 games at once. Um, so I'm actually I'm not like a proponent for this.
Mhm.
But the idea is not bad. Towards the end of it's like a festival at Counter Strike. It's like an event. It's like an online event.
Mhm.
For like if you as a viewer, you can go between so many different games, watch any game that you want at any time. And it's probably going on. It's like a celebration of Counter Strike. It's like a carnival.
Mhm.
It feels like too. I think the average hardcore fan, for the regular viewer, it's very difficult to catch up on all the storylines. All things said, but like for a hardcore viewer, I mean, I personally enjoyed it a bit.
Mhm.
Now I don't pay heavy attention to every single game. Again, I'm not invested into every single team. But I am
Mhm.
invested into the teams that do make it to the major. So I do like seeing all the games go down at once. That's at least from my perspective on this. Um, I might be wrong. You are free to disagree. I mean,
Yeah, no, I definitely see where you're coming from because the fact of the matter is this Rio Major is going to be a big deal. It makes a lot of sense to kind of give it the pop of circumstance as they wished, and I liked all of the little production quirks that they had, kind of like desks talking to desks across the
mhm,
pond and sharing kind of stories as to what Europe is up to, what America is up to. So if you were locked into just one stream, let's say ESL, CS:GO, D and E,
mhm.
for the
Like
Americas,
me.
that yeah, like you, that you'd be keeping up to date with what's going on in Europe
Mhm.
through those little segments. So I like the ideas that they brought forward. It's definitely like a cool kind of like retelling of the same old story of an RMR. And I'm interested to see how Blast is going to handle it. What kind of route that they want to take,
Mhm.
because that'll kind of be that deciding factor as to where the kind of scene overall is heading in terms of whether we want to deploy it all at once or one at a time.
I mean, for Blast, they're probably gonna accidentally set the standard of what a good RMR is about to look
Yeah.
like. I feel like that's gonna be the case. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't think this RMR was bad, and I actually want to keep one thing in mind for this RMR. While people hated the boot goal system and all that stuff, this RMR was unbelievably smooth. Unbelievably smooth. There was no drama around these games. At least if I can remember.
Yeah, there was like a couple 5-minute delays here or there,
Who
but
cares? Who
yeah,
cares?
but at that point, it's like that's just the nature of the tournament that I don't chalk that up to it being a negative situation. Like it was very smoothly run. Like I had no issues streaming all 4 games and watching all 4 games at the same time. Like there was no stoppage of play beyond timeouts. So that is also very impressive that they were able to do that after such an abysmal TO performance from ESL at EPL. I think it is a very quick turnaround.
Yeah, considering they're running 4 games. But all right, all right. Enough about talking about ESL tournament organizers, all that good stuff. The great upsets. All right, the great upsets in this one. How do they stack up in days gone by? Is G2 being eliminated? The new NIP losing to Vega Squadron. How are we gonna remember this?
I honestly think it's bigger. I'm not gonna lie, because
Hmm.
the thing about the NIP Vega Squadron game is that it was already a NIP on its last legs. Like they were kind of getting ready to disassemble and kind of go their separate ways. And the straw that broke the camel's back was that loss to Vega Squadron. And clearly, I mean, some of those players have gone on to do great things. I think this one, however, this is like a situation where G2 is pegged to be one of the favorites to win the entire tournament. And you are falling to a team that hadn't even announced the squad before the RMR. Like they just went straight in. And that in and of itself is kind of just shocking. It feels like a big discrepancy, so to speak, from G2, and to me, it just feels like one of the biggest ones in terms of major qualification,
Hmm.
in terms of snubs.
I wonder if we're gonna look back on this, like in history, because I think a lot of people, at least hardcore fans, definitely remember the NIP Vega Squadron debacle, where NIP fell to Vega Squadron and failed to make the major. I believe that was for Cologne 2016.
I believe it was for E-League. I
Was
believe
it
it
E
was for
League
E-League.
Atlanta? Actually, oh yeah,
Yeah,
you're definitely right. You're definitely right.
it
It
might.
was for E League. It was for E League. I remember the stage. But yeah, you're 100% right on that. They failed to make E League, which was the one of the biggest upsets of that era. I mean, is there anything that even compares to it? Like Fnatic, not even that close, because we knew Fnatic was bad. We knew Fnatic, like in these previous RMRs, they were like, okay, and then they plummeted out, and people are like, well, that's just Fnatic. This was probably going into this event, the number 5 team in the world, and I think undisputedly top 5 in the world. Right? No one would say that G2 weren't top 5 going into this event, and then this kind of capitulation. It's a crazy roller coaster.
Yeah, I really hope that G2's got a plan for these next couple of tournaments because they've got extra time, man. They might not have momentum, but they've got time to iron all of this out. There's no real excuses, I'd say, for them going into the fall finals. And if they're not able to qualify for the global finals, then hey, you're basically sitting out for 3 out of the 4 months of to close out the year, or sorry,
Mm-hmm.
2 months of the 3 to close out the year.
Yeah. Heading down along about these great upsets. We have some expectations. Not expectations in terms of team, but expectations in terms of the product of this potential major. We're talking about the Brazilian crowd. We're talking about the infrastructure there. Is this going to be the GOAT major, or is this going to be sort of like, a one-sided fan affair that I think some people fear?
I talked about this numerous times with a number of people, and I think the biggest thing is that Brazil has this issue that if Brazil is not playing, they do not care.
It's like the
And
fall finals. Remember last year?
for Portugal, yes, exactly.
Mm.
Oh, sorry, no, you're right. Is it Sao
Denmark.
Paulo?
No,
No,
I'm talking
oh,
about back in Denmark. I'm
right,
talking
right,
about
right. When
the Danish.
Astralis wasn't playing,
Yeah,
right?
Astralis wasn't playing. Half the venue left for the grand final.
Right. Even though it was a fantastic one, I believe it was Vitality breaking Navi's nuke streak. So,
Oh yeah,
that was a very very good series with not enough crowd expectations. So I think it's all predicated on how deep Furia is gonna go. Because let's face it, it's gonna be Furia if we have to talk about a team that needs to go deep. And yeah, maybe they'll get to the legend stage at the very least. I think anything beyond that is like, I don't know, like maybe they can make the champion stage. I can see them making a run there. If that's the case, if they can make the arena, then I think we can count this whole thing as a success. But if they can't, if there's an upset that happens and they fall through the cracks, I'm going to be quite worried, to say the least.
yeah. I mean, there's worries about the crowd, but hopefully, things get straightened up. And maybe we get the best maybe we get the best major of all time with the best crowd and
Maybe.
all that stuff. It'll be cool to see if Brazil makes a run at the major. Favorites for the major. It's like almost like a non-question. I'll head past the bell here. It's almost like a non-question because Paladin, answer this one quick. Are there even any favorites at this major?
No, not at all. Not at all. FaZe Navi
Everyone
looking shaky.
sucks.
G2's not even there. Vitality and C9, who even knows what
Team
they're going to
Liquid.
provide.
The Team Liquid come
as
from
well.
behind. Major win.
Yeah, exactly. Like who even knows? I mean, I'll just go put my name in the hat. I'll just say Vitality. I'll say they are the favorites just because they're coming off the back of an EPL win.
They're
But who
doing
knows?
good. I mean, they looked fine. They looked pretty seamless at the RMR. Navi and FaZe are definitely immortal. Like there's no question that we expect Navi and FaZe to be in the playoffs, but to win the thing, can't. And hang on, I'm just looking at the litany of teams. G2, that's a pretty interesting team. They probably could go pretty deep. Not sure about that one. All right. Anyways, jokes aside, let's go ahead and head into the stonk section as we roll on through. We'll talk about our playoffs investments for EPL. Yeah, it's been 2 weeks, but I think some of them definitely panned out. We'll go ahead and just head right on into it. Frozen and Spinks. How do you think your pick went?
I think Frozen did okay. I think he was like they kind of got blown out of the server in the playoffs, so I can't really say that the sample size is too big. But hey, I think Phi, you should be very happy to take home the winnings
Yeah,
for this playoff.
finally, I'm 1 for 10, baby. I'm 1 for 10. Let's
He
go.
doesn't miss.
Yeah. Okay. It eventually took 10 episodes for me to like get one like extremely right, and I definitely got one extremely right. Spinks had an incredible playoffs performance. I admittedly he wasn't like top of the board. In fact, I don't think he was really like his. He didn't even like play his average, so to speak. He did have a decline in form in the playoff stage. For I mean, I'll run through the matches individually, but I'm pretty sure he had a decline in form throughout those EPL playoffs.
He wasn't as consistent, but I think he had enough
He had
individual
peak game.
impact
He had some
that it
good
mattered.
peaks. He had some good
Yeah,
peaks.
yeah.
Is what I'll say. Like the series against Outsiders was very shaky from him, but
Mhm.
past that, it was a litany of just solid performances. He was solid, and that's what they need. That's what Vitality just need. They need someone solid because IWoo
Yep.
is in superstar form. All right, that's what I'll lay it on. Over to our RMR picks, however. Paladin. So we didn't like pick people for the RMR, but we're picking post of the RMR. We're gonna highlight a couple of players. Pally, yours?
Mine's a shot in the dark, but I do want to highlight him. I think this is the most important player across all of the players across the original Mouse NXT lineup. I'm talking about Shuhei. I'm talking about the IGL of Gamer Legion. His numbers don't necessarily jump off the page, but he had a much better rating than Hooksy, I'll tell you that much. 1.04 for the actual rating of the RMR itself, 0.96 over the last 30 months. And this upset was a huge one. It was a big one, and I think he made Gamer Legion look as good as it did. He's got some pots and pans to work with in terms of the misfits on this squad, but he's unlocked A core and he found a way to make it work with players like I am and Isaac who've been floating around the tier 2 European scene. I don't think the stats necessarily jump off the page, but man, do the results.
Yeah, I mean, unlocking Acor, I am Isaac, big achievement there for the guys over at Gamer Legion. I went ahead and selected Cello. This man, he's basically the man who was solely responsible for Imperial getting through to getting through to the major and making the major worth watching. Truly, for Brazil, 0-0 Nation and Furia, they don't have the biggest fan bases. All right, I'll tell you that. They not okay, and not just for the storyline's sake here for Cello, but at the same time, he just was a quality player. Did you see that first half against Complexity?
Oh yeah, on overpass, right?
Yeah, he just ran out,
He didn't
dry
stop.
double
Yeah.
entry'd A site every single round. He's an
He did fall off.
insane level player.
He did fall off a little bit on the CT side, but as soon as overtime dinged, like he was back into it. Like he had some really key impact rounds on his own as well. Hats off to him for staying cool under the pressure. I know that guy is a very up and down, emotional player, and
Mhm.
when he's like kind of down and out of it, he can't really get back into it. It was a
Mhm.
big problem on MIBR. But playing around the players that he is on Imperial, like this move's just a slam dunk. He's doing very well under Fallen Inferno. I'm sure they've been able to route him very well to achieve big things. So that is a very good investment. I think he'll be absolutely ignited in Rio if I had to pick an individual from Brazil's camp.
Well, folks, it's time for overtime. We've reached closer and closer towards the end of our show. Well, we have about 5 minutes or so to go ahead and give you guys some of the topics that we did miss throughout this. If I do have the countdown up and running, but either way, moving that one along. Talking about Complexity. They who fell short at the Americas RMR. Complexity for sure, man. 3 opportunities, every single series, nail-bitingly close. They couldn't put it
I
across.
we discussed about this previously, and I think the biggest proponent that I can say is when has Extrasol been pushed to the limit?
Mhm.
I'm talking about the original core of this roster. They have never been
Sure.
pushed into pressure situations. Yeah, sure, you can count the ECL runs that they've had. You can count the Fun Spark Ulti series that they had. But JT as an IGL has never been pushed across his entire
He's always
career.
been an underdog, right? He's always been an
Yeah,
underdog and never the favorite, right? When this
and
team plays with the favorite, they just never perform.
yeah, and at this point, you're expected to go through. You're expected to beat 0-0. You're expected to beat Imperial as well. And not being able to do
Mhm.
that is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not gonna say that this complexity roster is just falling apart and we should just dissect it right now. I think they should keep going. I think they should keep this roster. Understand that this is an experience that you're gonna have to understand and learn from. Because hey, you could see how much antsiness there was in some of these players. Hauser being overly aggressive. I spoke about this a myriad of times, but all the individuals being very nervous. And I think that all in all, Imperial has taught them a very important lesson. I think they can come back much stronger and much more humble when they head into their next tournaments and learn from it because every single series from now on, they know that they have something to overcome now. They have this roadblock that they've got to break through.
I will say someone who definitely turned up for this complexity team though is Fang. An
Oh yeah.
incredible tournament out of him. In particular, even that final series. I mean, just so many clutches and almost
Oh
almost
yeah.
became Brazil's biggest enemy. You know, public enemy number one.
Who knows what would happen if they won, man? They went to Rio. Who knows? Fang would have been getting the
Oh,
DMs of his life.
woo, buddy! With 350,000 people watching him hit 1v1,
Oh
1v3
yeah.
clutches on them, yeah,
Mhm.
that was. I mean, he was hitting some crowd silencers. Um, I mean, incredible event from him. But overall, that's. I mean, it's tough luck, but that's just how it goes sometimes. Um, anything else? Other
ECL
L's?
team,
Yeah, I mean
the
the
ECL
ECL
NA team.
teams. I had expectations for Team One, they didn't deliver. I had expectations for ATK,
Yeah.
and they got slaughtered once it came to real opposition.
Nouns actually look pretty decent. I didn't expect them to make it, but they did push Imperial. George Snorts, he
George
certainly
Snort's
showed
my
something.
goat.
Yeah, I mean, we in this household respect and love George Snorts. Just for this RMR, I suppose, but he was very, very good. ATK also, I mean, the upset win over MIBR was pretty cool. Like I like that they were able to at least
Mm-hmm.
stick it to a contender. Although they didn't qualify, the kind of reasons that we gave previously on other episodes of like, hey, these guys really struggle in pressure scenarios. When it came down to it, they had a ripe opportunity and they couldn't convert either. So bummer for them. I guess it's just like a go next situation for all three of these teams
Mm-hmm.
because they kind of just got outclassed. The pool was just far too deep, and they weren't able to stay afloat.
It's really rough though for ATK because that's kind of like the end of their season. Same goes for Nouns
Yeah,
as well. Team One have a lot else to look forward to. It's just the end of the world, not making the major, and admittedly they didn't really deliver on LAN in the way that I was hoping for them to,
it
considering
took
that.
mobs. It took mobs and Pesa way too long to wake up. You know.
Exactly, and I mean, Team One on land just has not been a threat. Even at
Mhm.
Philadelphia 17, they weren't a threatening team. They got blown out by Evil Genius's Party Astronauts. Um, I mean, not too crazy on that front, for sure.
Yeah, but overall, I'd like to say ECL any team should be generally happy. I think that like staying competitive against these squads that you know are going to qualify is super important. And I think I personally am satisfied with what ECL showed. I'm hoping that they can actually show some of that same level in the playoffs, and that we can have a very competitive little end of the season for them. It's heading into the conference because there's a lot on the line for some of these teams, regardless.
Yeah, well, folks, with on that note though, about all these seasons ending, dreams being made for Imperial, dreams being dashed, for some of the young players who no Captain Kurka stickers. So unfortunately, that is my biggest loss of the RMR. Unfortunate here, Paladin. What is your biggest loss, quote unquote, of the RMR?
My biggest loss is that I didn't get to hear Smooya screech.
Oh, oh, visas. Vsauce, please. Vsauce or something like that. I don't know.
Visa.
I don't know. Help us out here. Tough luck. Well, folks, that's gonna do it here for episode 11 of the NA podcast. We have been the number just keeps going up for every episode we do, Paladin. I can't believe it. But we're gonna come on with some newer stuff, some more stuff. We hope to innovate the show, build it up a little bit extra, potentially some interviews down the stretch, and a little bit of a graphics redesign is incoming, and it's probably needed. So, on that note, that's gonna do it here. Any final words here, Paladin? Any final words?
Future of this podcast is looking bright, man. I mean, you mentioned those ideas. They're gonna come hot and heavy, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy it as much as we do making them. So hats off to you guys.
Yeah, well, from wherever you're watching this or whenever you're watching this, thank you guys so much for watching this episode, and tune in. Typically on Tuesdays we upload and Mondays we stream, but our schedules are so damn inconsistent that don't bet on it. Just stay tuned. See you then.